Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to have you join us today for Build Collective Cerebral Power through Policy Change. I'm just going to give everyone 30 seconds or so to get comfortable, get a glass of water, get situated, whatever you need. I'm going to get us started in just about 30 seconds. All right, everyone, we're going to get going here. Hello, my name is Sabrina Ham. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am the Policy and Advocacy Specialist at Freefrom. And co-presenting with me today is Em. And Em, you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Happy that you all are here. My name is M. Jackson. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I'm the Director of Peer Engagement and Support.
Thank you. So again, today our webinar is Building Collective Cerebral Power Through Policy Change. And so today's webinar is really for survivors who are interested in learning more about how to get involved in policy change and advocacy work through our recently launched policy map and scorecard. So before we get started with the content of today, I'm just going to go through a couple housekeeping items. We're going to do an introduction of Freefrom, and then I'm going to do a detailed demonstration of the policy map and scorecard. And we'll spend the bulk of the time doing a discussion and then leaving the last about 5-10 minutes or so for Q&A. So a couple housekeeping items. So today's presentation will be recorded, and also the presentation slides will be available. So for everyone who registered today, you'll be sent the presentation slides in PDF form, and then also the recording in case you'd like to refer back to it or share it with folks in your network. And then also, I just wanted to take a moment for you all to just locate where the chat function in the Zoom. We will be using that throughout today's presentation. So feel free to use the chat function to answer the questions and discussion items that we have today, and to interact with the other participants during the presentation. So we are going to get started with the grounding activity in just a second, but I know that some folks, this may be their first time getting interested in policy work or advocacy work, and just want to make sure that we have some keywords displayed here so that we're all sort of starting on the same page. I'm just going to walk through these just one by one, and then if you have any questions or need clarification, feel free to use the chat as well, and we can address any questions or comments that come up. So when we say policy is really a law, a regulation, a procedure, administrative action of governments and other institutions. And so it really lays out the details of how something is going to play out. And so, for example, the Affordable Care Act is a policy. It's also known as Obamacare, which lays out sort of who's eligible for it, how much it's going to cost, what are the details, and sort of the nitty-gritty of how this particular policy, this particular program is going to play out. And then we have legislation, which are laws and rules made by the government. And so when we talk about legislation, it's really, a legislator, or a government entity, laying out how a particular program will be run, or how a particular law or policy be laid out, really the details of it. And then a legislator is a government official that makes the laws. So the president, vice president, your elected official, a senator, a state senator, Congress folks, people who are really in charge of making the laws and passing them. And then we have advocacy, which is essentially public support for an issue, a cause, or a policy. And advocacy can range from really small acts to really large, grand acts as well. And then the policy-making process is the process in which a policy idea, so whatever idea you have about how a program should be changed, how new protections should be made, becomes law. So from the starting point of it becoming an idea to it being passed and then also implemented. So that's the policy-making process. And then coalition is a group of people or organization in alliance towards shared goals. And so you'll see this coming up and talking about a policy advocacy coalition, and essentially organizations across potentially movements or issue areas are coming together to either pass a certain law or come together to achieve a certain goal. And so if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to add them in the chat and then we'll be able to address them. All right, so we're gonna get started with our grounding activity. Go ahead.
All right, everyone. So we want to make sure that we're able to get really grounded within ourselves before we dive into all of this wonderful information that Sabrina is going to present to us. So I would like to invite you all to take a few deep breaths. Close your eyes if you would like to. Sit comfortably or choose a body position that really feels good to you. And even if you have to stretch right now or even throughout the presentation, feel free to do that. And I also invite you to check in with yourself. How are you feeling? What are you bringing with you? What are you leaving behind? All right, I really appreciate those who were able to accept that invitation and those who also even just considered it. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So I wanted to start with asking you all, what was your first interaction with policy and/or advocacy? What was that like for you? And if you can think through this question and go ahead and type your responses in the chat box. This is really for us to get a sense of who's in the room and what their thoughts are when it comes to policy and advocacy. So if you're comfortable, if you would please respond to this question in the chat. And we also have our co-pilot, AK. AK, if you could introduce yourself very quickly, and then also can you read some of the responses that are coming in?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is AK, she, her pronouns. And I'm going to be doing some tech support today. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and message me through the chat as well. And some of the answers about first interactions with policy and or advocacy are when in college and student government, the feeling of excitement, city government, first experience spanned over 27 years ago for somebody for the prison services in London.
Wow, some great answers. I appreciate y'all for going ahead and participating in that. And it looks like we got one more that just came in. AK, do you mind reading that one?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as a child, I would go with my godmother to senators in Sacramento to fight for families and children around childcare issues and access.
Wow, that's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right, if we could go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So many of you may be familiar with the work that we do at Free From, but for those of us that are on the webinar that may not be as familiar, I wanted to go ahead and break down our approach. So at Free From, we envision a world where survivors have sustaining income, savings, and credit with which to build wealth and the resources to support individual, intergenerational, and community healing. To that end, we take a holistic approach using data, technology, peer-to-peer networks, training programs for shelters, policy advocacy, social enterprise models, as well as cross-sector solutions. And with our approach, what we really look to do is to create an ecosystem of support for survivors. Next slide, please. So thinking about our approach and the work that we do, the question comes up of why exactly do we focus on financial security? Next slide. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 2 trans folks will experience gender-based violence in their lifetime. the number one obstacle to safety for survivors is financial insecurity. $104,000 is the average cost associated with being a female survivor of domestic violence, and 99% of survivors experience financial abuse as part of their domestic violence. So what all of this says is that it is incredibly expensive to experience domestic violence, and most folks are experiencing economic abuse as well. And folks that are experiencing the economic abuse are financially devastated. And when we're thinking about those that are caring for others and caring for children as well, that can really affect their ability to rebuild and heal from the trauma that and the harm that they endured. So we like to focus our work around financial security and financial freedom, because we see these staggering statistics and how much of an impact economic abuse has on survivors during their healing journey. Next slide, please. During our Survivor Knows Best report, and we'll go ahead and drop that in the chat for you all in case you haven't read it yet, we went ahead and dove a little bit deeper into the staggering cost of economic abuse. So what we did is we asked survivors who reported experiencing economic abuse to approximate the cost of harm that they had experienced. On average, we had survivors reporting that harm doers stole $1,280 from them each month. Harm doers were restricting their freedom to spend an additional $1,090 of their own money as they saw fit each month. Harm doers incur $15,936 in coerced or fraudulent debt in their names each year. They lose out on $23,076 of income every year, and survivors are incurring $17,770 in property damage costs over the cost of every year. And so as we see with these numbers, it's astonishing. And I'm sure most folks that are on the webinar, watching this presentation, as well as those who may not have experienced this themselves, but that of the economic abuse, that this is something that you truly understand and you get and you can empathize with. But again, this is just showing why we focus on financial security within our work. Okay, next slide, please. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pass it back over to Sabrina so you can talk to us about the policy map and scorecard.
Right. Thank you so much, Em, for that introduction of Free From and our work and why we focus on financial security. And so over the past year and a half or so, we spent time looking at various policies and how they impact survivor financial security. And we found that a lot of states, unfortunately, are not prioritizing survivor financial security in their state policies. And so this is how we came to building the National Survivor Financial Security Policy Map and Scorecard. And so just before I do, and we're going to spend about 10 minutes or so, just me walking through the map and scorecard, how to use it, some of the key functions. But before I do that, I'd love to just get a sense of, what comes up for you when you see the word or hear the word policy. Like, is that a word that resonates with you? Is that a word that, what comes up for you? I'm going to give everyone a few seconds to type that in the chat. Okay, I'm seeing some things coming in. Thank you. AK, do you mind reading out some of the responses that we've gotten?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what comes up for us when we hear the word policy, some things that we're saying are change, slow moving, overwhelming, representative, laws that impact society, protection, and more change.
Great. Thank you all so much for sharing that. And I certainly resonate with all of those words: slow moving, overwhelming, change. And it certainly can be overwhelming. And so so I'm just going to do a quick overview, and then we're just going to dive right into the actual website. So the goal for us at Free From in building this map and scorecard is really trying to get every state to reprioritize and focus on policies that impact survivor financial security. We want them to center every single state to center every policy on survivor financial security. As we know, as Em had mentioned, and talked about some of the statistics and data that we have been able to gather, is just the financial devastation that survivors experience. And also we want to create a space for survivors to engage actively and participate in the policy-making process. And really, I think with some of the things that came up in the chat, overwhelming, slow moving, things like that, we really wanted to build a tool that allowed for users, survivors, folks who were interested in policy advocacy to engage in the policy-making process in even small and simple ways that can fit within their own abilities and time and all that. And so I'm just going to take one moment to switch over to the website. So please bear with me one moment here. All right, y'all. So I'm going to spend some time talking through the policy map and scorecard. So the URL is mapandscorecard.freefrom.org. And when you go on here, you'll see essentially how every state measures up in supporting survivor financial security. And I know that for folks who are living in states where it's red or pink, it may be kind of challenging to see and to know that you're living in a state that they're not prioritizing survivor financial security. And so, I recognize that and I understand that. And I think this means there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of policy potential for there to be change. Like even if a state is, mostly negative or mostly, showing little accountability, to me, I see that as an opportunity for policy change. And so you'll see how each state is scored. You'll see the key up on top. Model state, unfortunately, there are no model states. There's a few financial security friendly states, a handful of taking steps, and then majority of states, unfortunately, are some accountability and little accountability. And so once you go onto the site, you'll be able to click through any of the states. You'll be able to click through any of the states where you live, where a friend lives, family members, any state really, and you can go into more detail about that. So you can get to this map, you can get to the scorecard on the actual map image or through the side search bar. So if you wanna look up a state, or if it's a really tiny state over here that you don't feel like zooming in or trying to find, you can go ahead and find that and click on the state. So I'm going to go into a state in just a moment to really talk through the map and scorecard. So on the main page, you'll see a couple things. So you'll see a snapshot of essentially the culmination of all the scores of every state. So model state, financial security state, taking steps, some accountability and little accountability. And then we spent some time highlighting some of the really strong and model policies that various states have under the states to watch. And so this will change periodically as a state either increases in scores or they're really doing some innovative policy work. And then we'll also be sure to include any of the resources or citations so that you can go into the actual state respective site and see the details, the legislative details of that policy. And then we have a snapshot of the survivor financial security policies by category. So we have 13 different policy categories and just sort of a culmination of what states have no policy, which state has adverse policies, and which state has supportive policies. And you can sort of get a sense that, a handful of states, quite a few states are doing really great in paid and protected leave, unemployment insurance, and then you'll see other states most states are not doing so well in other categories like defining economic abuse in their state laws, protections against litigation abuse, accessibility to victims of crime compensation. And just wanted to take a moment to scroll through this so you can sort of see what we have on here. So we have safe banking protections for coerced and fraudulent debt, rental protections, etc. And if you're interested in sort of learning more about how we scored each policy or sort of how we came to the evaluation and criteria method, you'll be able to do that in the methodology. So you can get to the methodology from the About This tool here, or in the footer on the in the bottom that says full methodology. So I'm just going to take a moment and just go into one of the states, and I'm choosing Illinois. So when you get into one of the states, you'll see a quote from a survivor. We really want to make sure that we are grounding everything that we do in survivor experiences. And you'll see how the state scored and then essentially how they scored for each one of the policy categories. And so I'm just going to take a moment to open up one of the scores here. So you'll see each scorecard, each category in the scorecard is divided up into 4 different sections. So we have positive policies that the state has. So yes, this is check, check, check. Yes, this is everything that the state has. And then you have adverse policies that this state has, so things that are actually really harmful for survivors. In particular, if, for example, if in order to access paid and protective leave, for example, that they require a survivor to produce a police report or a court order, like things like that will cause additional hurdle for a survivor to be able to access this particular policy or this particular program or protection. And then we have positive policies that this state should adopt. So this is something that they should, if someone were to go back and work on Illinois paid and protective leave policy and trying to improve it, we would suggest that this item right here, leave is guaranteed paid, for this state in particular, should be added and expanded to make this paid and protective leave policy even stronger and potentially a model policy. And then we have adverse policies the state should avoid. And it may be a little confusing, but this is not saying that the state has it. It's just sort of recognizing that in case someone does go back and tinkers with Illinois' paid and protected leave policy, that they're not going to do it in a way that's actually more harmful for survivors or prevent them from accessing this particular protection. And then you'll have related resources, which will link directly to the state statute. So you can get really down into the details of this particular policy. Okay, so that's just sort of what a scorecard looks like. And then we have the key you can see the keys to get a better sense of how things are scored. And then we have a couple different things. So you can sign up for state updates. So if you want to sign up for, all the states that you like, is it Illinois? Is it, the state you live in? Is it the state that a friend lives in? Is it all of them? And then anytime that there's an update on a state's policy, we'll be emailing those who sign up. And then we have also report and missing information with 50 states plus DC, 13 different policy categories. We understand that there could be some things that we may have missed or overlooked. And so if you are working in policy or you realize that, oh, this thing isn't quite right, rental protections for this state isn't quite right, here's the accurate information. And we welcome and appreciate all of that. And then again, if you want to go into more details about the scoring guide, the glossary, things like that, that is certainly here. This is more details about the definitions of each score. And then we have a glossary of key terms. I know that for some folks, some of these terms may be a little bit, they may not quite understand or maybe have a slightly different definition than how we used it. So we included that in here as well. And then again, the full methodology. So I'm just going to take a few moments to go through some of the take action. And so my absolute favorite function of this map and scorecard is the contact your legislator. I think this is like one of the coolest things that we included. And so what you do is that once you click on it, you can contact your legislators through various ways. So I have a zip code that I randomly found for Illinois. I'm going to enter that in. So if you just do the zip code and you click enter or submit, you'll see the contact information for your governor and then your lieutenant governor. So you could theoretically call your governor and say, hey, like you need to begin to prioritize survivor financial security in your state laws. Check out Free From's map and scorecard. You can tweet at them, you can Facebook them, and then if their email address is available, then then a sample script will also come up. So if you all have time, feel free to check this out and to also, contact your legislator. This is a really simple and easy lift for y'all to actually be engaged and get your representative interested and focusing on survivor financial security. And then we have the Build Collective Survivor Power, which is, one of the things that we are going to be working on is really creating a space and opportunity for survivors to work with other survivors in their state to move forward policy change. And so if you're interested in connecting with other survivors in your state, you can go ahead on our map and scorecard, fill this form out. And if you, there's a number of different ways that you can interact with other survivors or get involved. If you just simply want to learn how to do advocacy in your state, if you just want to connect with other survivors, if you want to join or start a survivor-led policy advocacy coalition, if you're just want to learn more about our peer-to-peer financial support group, if you want to do all of those things, if you have other ideas, feel free to use this form to do that as well. And then we have partner with Free From, and this is really for folks who are interested, who have a policy idea, either working with an organization or really want to take the steps to move forward a policy. So if they're in their state and we really want to work on addressing protections for coerced and fraudulent debt. So, you'll fill this out and then I will contact you and we'll have some follow-up conversations to talk about where you're at in this process. And so for some organizations, they just want to maybe do a brainstorm on okay, where do I even start? Others are we know where to start, but we need help drafting legislation. Others may be, well, let's talk, maybe we can do a policy related event or webinar or discussion. And then, or they're interested in learning more about our policy group, or if they really want to get the boots on the ground to get legislation moved from point A to point B. And that's sort of what this partner with Free From looks like. And then we have share your policy ideas. So we know that, the map and scorecard doesn't include every single potential policy that is out there. And this is an opportunity for you all and for survivors to share what your ideas are. What issues should Free From prioritize? And when it comes to policy, what are things that are not included on the map and scorecard that we should consider? We'll continue to update and expand the map and scorecard, but we really want to make sure that it's that we get user engagement and involvement, especially from survivors in this process. So if you have any ideas, even if it's a small idea, big idea, whatever it is, that's where you would use the share your policy ideas. And so this is hopefully pretty self-explanatory. And so I believe I went through all of the take actions, and then just quickly about some of the things that are up on top is we have the About This tool, which is a little bit more detail, and then we have the Give Feedback, which is really about how you're using this tool. Is it helpful? Is it not? Can it can it be better in some way, which is slightly different than sharing your policy idea and slightly different than updating information. This is really about how do we improve the functionality of this map and scorecard. And then that is, I think, just about everything. And I'm happy to address any questions or anything like that that comes up for folks. Em or AK, were there any questions or any clarifications needed?
Nothing that I can see.
Okay, so I'm going to stop this screen share and switch back over to the slide, so please bear with me. Great, so hopefully you all can see that. So I would love to just take a moment to hear from you all. What's missing of the policy categories on the scorecard? What's missing? What other things should we consider? And I just realized it would probably be helpful to go back. Okay, if you have any other policy ideas, feel free to share.
Sabrina, someone in the chat mentioned housing insecurity.
Yes, certainly. That's a really good one. Anything else?
Sabrina, there is a question in the chat, if you're okay with answering that now.
Yeah, I can totally do that. So this was, someone said that they called and emailed their legislator when this first came out, but haven't heard back. What does this process normally, how does this process normally work? Should they at least be acknowledging you? So it varies per state. And I know that I think it varies per state and also varies per office. So some offices, elected officials' office will have an automated message or like acknowledging that they received your email or information. And I think that should at least be the bare minimum. I think it also varies on how busy they are in terms of the legislative process. And so I think if you have contacted them already and they're not acknowledging you, I think I would say it's okay to contact them again. And then if you want to reach out to me, maybe we can think of a strategy or plan to really get them focused on whatever, either all of financial security or a particular policy issue. I'm happy to work with you and brainstorm on how we can do that. And someone said it's Texas. Thank you, AK. Yes, my email is now in the chat. So folks really want to get going on some policy change. I'm here to support and help in any way. And I also see resources at Women's Shelter. Yes, thank you for sharing that. Any other policy ideas or issues that came up for folks that we should add? All right, if anything else comes up, feel free to email me, feel free to in the chat, on the website, however it works for you, it works for me. So I'm gonna hand it over to Em to continue the rest of our conversation.
All right, thank you so much, Sabrina. That was wonderful, the way that you walked through the tool. And also, I'm very happy to see that my home state of Illinois is doing their job, but we know they could do a little bit better. So we're hoping that they continue to work towards financial security for survivors. So the question that I have for you all to answer in the chat is, what are some ways you've participated in policy advocacy or engagement? And before you go ahead and respond with that, I want you to really think about advocacy and what that means to you. Because of course it's different types of advocacy that can take place. And for some, it may not feel accessible for them to contact a legislator for various reasons. So it may mean that for you that it's retweeting or sharing something via social media to increase public awareness. It may also be that you are signing on to a newsletter or attending a march or a protest. Maybe even you are showing advocacy and engagement through what you're wearing. Perhaps you wear a Black Lives Matter mask or a t-shirt or something like that. So I just wanted to make sure I put those out there as well as examples, so we can even think outside of what most folks would think of when they think of policy advocacy and engagement. So if you all can think of some ways that you've participated in the past or even currently in policy advocacy or engagement, if you can put those in the chat.
Okay, we're starting to get some answers. I'll just go ahead and read them out. Phone banking, volunteering, donating. You can engage on a city level, starting a commission in your city, town, county that addresses women's safety, protests and social media engagement, community involvement, peer advocacy, interagency forums, engaging with other organizations, sending email templates to contact legislators, sharing on social media, newsletters and radio, changing our organizational policies. Wow. Participation on press conference call with senators and constituents advocating how legislation needs to be put in law, like VAWA and American Rescue Plan, and wearing a survivor supporting clothing.
Wow. Thank you all for putting those answers in the chat. Honestly, it feels really good to hear such a variety of different types of policy advocacy and engagement. And I'm even seeing another one that's coming through right now, or another few that are coming through. So the fact that it's so many that you all could just think of off the top of your head that you have been engaging in, that's incredible. So thank you for answering that. Okay, next slide, please. So what other ways would you like to be part of the policy making process? You know, thinking about everything that Sabrina broke down with the policy mapping tool and scorecard, where there's different things that were coming through to your head, where you were saying, you know, there's different things that I would like to get involved in. If you can put those in the chat. This is all very helpful for us when we're thinking about creating these survivor-led coalitions, state coalitions, and just figuring out how we can also work towards building a survivor-led movement and work towards that collective power of survivors. So what other ways would you like to be part of the policy-making process? And these can be very hands-on ways, and they can also be hands-off ways as well.
Okay, I'm going to share some responses. There's a lack of access to policy education, the process of policymaking from a resident citizen advocate perspective. Institutionally, both in school and government, there's a lack of resources and education. So considering those things, do we have recommendations for that? Making it more accessible for survivors to charge their challenges. And shaping the way and type of research being conducted, getting research orgs to collect data policymakers needs. Great
answers. Sabrina, I'm going to ask for that first comment that came through that talked about policy education. Did you have a response for that, for the specific work that you're doing?
So let me reread this for a second. I think that's something that when it comes to starting or building the sort of survivor-led coalitions that Free From was hoping to build, that's certainly something that we will start with. And I think as of right now, I think a really good source is looking at sort of local, like sort of grassroots organizations, and even sometimes the state. A lot of states have like a budget office. So like for California, it's like the Cal Budget Office that has some really good advocacy tools. So it varies by state. And I think you bringing this up really makes us think that maybe potentially including on the map and scorecard or somewhere on Free From's website is having a step-by-step guide. The biggest challenge is that it varies so widely by state. Like California's legislative process is so long, not so long, but it's like, you know, a year in the making, or, you know, 2 years. Legislative session is like 2 years. Other states, it's a few months. And so I think it's going to really be about seeing what any state specific resources are available. And I'm happy to maybe offline points, do a little bit of research on my own and point to some good resources for you.
Thank you so much for answering that, Sabrina. And then if you all want to scroll up in the chat, Sabrina's contact information is there if you would like to get more individualized resources from Sabrina. And I'm seeing some other comments that are coming in, and just going back to some other ones that are talking about research and making it all more accessible for survivors to be able to share their challenges. So creating that space. And I think this goes to the survivor-led state coalitions that Sabrina was mentioning, and how we're able to use those to really censor survivors' voices and make sure it's not just folks talking about what survivors need, but survivors themselves saying, no, this is exactly what I need to be able to thrive. Excellent. And someone else is talking about a roadmap that could be helpful. Kind of like the old school House of Rock video on how a bill becomes a law. Oh yes, I remember that very vividly. And I also want to point out this comment of researchers not tokenizing people with their lived experiences. It's very important. All right, thank y'all for those responses. Next slide, please. So thinking through all of this, even for some folks that weren't maybe as comfortable with responding, or just nothing really came to mind for them at this moment, do you have any hesitations or limitations about engaging in policy advocacy? So if you're comfortable with it, if you can go ahead and answer that question in the chat box. So again, any hesitations or limitations about engaging in policy advocacy? And even just being honest and vulnerable for myself, it can be a lot of information. It can be unfamiliar territory to engage in. So I know for myself, it's taken a while for me to say I want to be engaged in this type of work in different ways that are non-traditional for me to be engaged in policy work.
Someone shared that the language use is definitely a hurdle. Might seem scary, and also does the use of our name always have to be included? So do we have to share our name? One of the hesitations is if your advocacy work is public and just don't like getting trolled. So you see so many activists nowadays getting death threats for challenging the status quo. It's a real concern.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody else shared the shame from systems and lack of accountability of harm doers, the power systems put on you as an advocate to make you feel that you are wrong. And then someone shared that they don't have any hesitations.
Let me start by saying I really appreciate the vulnerability in this chat and just throughout the presentation as well. Everything that you all are talking about when it comes to the hesitations and limitations are definitely valid feelings. And I appreciate you being comfortable enough to share that in a space where others can see that and relate to that as well. And that's what we're trying to do. Sabrina definitely in her program and in her department is really working to make sure we can assist in taking away the shame that's experienced by folks and to make sure that it's not the type of work that has to be limited and that also has to be difficult to engage in. And I know someone else had brought up language being a hurdle, and I completely agree with that. Because you want to make sure everything is something that folks can relate to and can understand. I'm seeing another comment that is saying that the bully of law enforcement towards survivors and then advocates. Yes, yes, yes. Again, I know I said it already, but thank you all so much for being so vulnerable with us in this moment. And one other thing that I'll say is if you all are comfortable or would like to engage with other folks that are in the chat and you would like to continue these conversations with one another, feel free. We always are encouraging that peer-to-peer support that you can provide one another. Okay. Before I move forward, Sabrina, is there anything that you want to say to folks that are feeling hesitant or limited with engaging in policy advocacy?
Yeah, I totally understand, and I appreciate everyone sharing their hesitation. I think there's, small ways that folks can get engaged that may not be as public. And I think, um, even calling your legislator or sending them an email or something like that, that's, it's not open for, the world to see. That could be a one-on-one thing, or even just on our map and scorecard, sharing your policy idea. Like, I think that is a small way that that isn't public that you all can participate in. And I think hopefully with building out our survivor-led policy advocacy coalitions, that we can really think about what suits folks' ability and like comfortability of participating in policy advocacy. And it doesn't always have to be marching the streets. It doesn't always have to be, testifying in a committee hearing. There's a wide variety of ways. And that's something that we really want to highlight, that, there's something for everyone to get involved in. So and again, I just appreciate everyone sharing your vulnerability with us.
Thank you, Sabrina. Next slide, please. All right, and this next question that we have, I'm passing it over to Sabrina to be able to finish the rest of the presentation.
All right. So thank you all again so much for this conversation and for being engaged with us today. And I think as we are trying to figure out and think about how we can get more survivors engaged in the policymaking process, we'd love to hear from you. How can we, as Free From, the organization, myself, how can we help you get to start getting more involved? Is it a little bit more to the map and scorecard? Is it offering space for folks to work together? Like, we'd love to hear any ideas that you all have.
Also, I want to pop in and say, this isn't something that you all have to have an answer for right now. You can go ahead and contact any of us. We'll have our contact information at the end to share things that you think of later on, or maybe you're more comfortable having a one-on-one conversation as opposed to sharing it in a group setting. We completely get that. So if you have something that you want to share in the chat, feel free to go ahead and do that. Or if you would like to wait until later, then you can do that as well.
Okay, I'm seeing a couple. AK, do you mind reading some of them, please?
Mhm. Yeah, so definitely the space and opportunity to connect with others and work collaboratively, educational scholarship to learn more about the policymaking process and resources, and hosting a policy 101 session.
I am so excited about all of these ideas. Like I just my brain was like, oh my gosh, let's get going. So thank you all for this. If you, and you know, we'll be sure to keep in touch with all of you. And if you want to share more ideas, feel free to contact myself or M or anything like that. Thank you, AK, for sharing our contact information again. So we are almost out of time, but I just wanted to give a couple minutes to talk about what's next. So about our policy map and scorecard and all that. So we will be regularly updating and expanding the map and scorecard. So if folks have feedback, want to share their policy ideas, want to make sure that, you know, report any missing or incomplete information, we welcome and appreciate all of it. And then we are going to be working with survivors and advocates across the nation to pass survivor financial security centered policies in every single state. And so that is our ultimate goal, is to create a space where state governments are really prioritizing survivor financial security beyond just the 13 different policy categories we have listed. We want state governments to prioritize survivors in every single one of the policies that they have. And then also we're going to be facilitating the creation of survivor-led policy coalitions at the state level. And so it's really great to see that folks are interested in a space like that and wanting to maybe do some trainings, maybe get connected with other folks in their state. And so we're going to be getting starting on that. If you all want to get in contact with us, feel free to do that. We'll certainly continue to reach out to you all as well. Okay, so we have the last few minutes, and I just want to open it up to any questions, comments, thoughts, feedback, feelings, whatever y'all want to share. We'll spend the last few minutes talking through those.
Sabrina, there is a question that says,
Okay.
do we work with, excuse me, Rise Now? They've worked on a survivor bill or rights, but I don't know if they have financial security policies within that.
Yeah, as of right now, we don't have a partnership with them or collaboration with them, but thank you for sharing the link, and I'll look into it and see if that's something that we can either support or work together on.
Another question says, do you plan on expanding this internationally?
Yeah, at this time, no. You know, Free From is a national organization. We haven't had a conversation about expanding our work internationally yet, but I wouldn't say it's a hard no. It just hasn't been a conversation.
And that person added, or taking an international view, but it sounds like you answered that as well.
Yeah, yeah. Any other questions, thoughts, feedback?
Another question that came was, how often do you update your data?
Yeah, so we will be updating it on, as of right now, an annual basis, just because policy moves slow. And so we'll just be updating as, on an annual basis. But there are some corrections that we'll need to do. And if there's a correction, then we'll do those immediately, essentially.
Okay, so someone else is saying that they're in California in the Bay Area and they only know of YWCA, Silicon Valley, but they don't offer much on financial security education, and they think orgs could benefit from taking Free From's approach. Thank you. I wish
Thank you
more,
for that feedback.
yeah, I wish more organizations did. Just a note comment. Thank you for that comment. We really
Yes.
appreciate that.
Mhm.
And then someone else said Bill Wilson Center might be a place to look.
I'm making note of all of these things, and certainly will be saving the chat so I can go back and refer to all the things that you all have suggested and shared.
And I see someone has their hand raised. Oh, okay. If you would like to place your question in the chat or talk to one of us one-on-one, we can do that as well.
All right, folks. If anything else comes up, feel free to contact us. If you really want to get some moving on legislation, I would be the point of contact for that, and would love to partner with you or work with you on all of that. All right. Well, thank you all again, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.